Review Subcommittee will come to order. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Rocky Adams. Senator Thayer. Senator Yates. Present. Representative Bridges. Representative Fraser Gordon. Representative Herron. Co-Chair Lewis.
Here.
Chairman West.
Here. We have a quorum duly constituted to conduct business. We are now going to approve the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion for approval? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Please call the first regulation.
Education Professional Standards Board, 16 KAR 1030 Emergency, 16 KAR 2030 Emergency, 16 KAR 711, 16 KAR 910 Emergency, 930, 980 Emergency, 9100 Emergency.
16 KAR 1030 emergency is being amended to specify requirements for processing complaints against certificate holders and update statutory references. 2030 emergency is being amended to include certification requirements for substitute teaching certificates, update the priority selection process, and remove the emergency non-certified personnel program. 7011 repeals 16 KAR 7010, which establishes the standards for the Kentucky Teacher Internship Program. 9010 emergency is being amended to establish the application requirements and renewal process for an Option 1 provisional certificate. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with the board's statutory authority and the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and makes technical changes. 9030 is being amended to change the prerequisites to obtain a provisional teaching certificate for college faculty, establish the evidence required for the provisional certificate application, change the process to renew a provisional certificate, establish the process for applying for a professional certificate upon completing the one-year teaching experience, and remove material incorporated by reference. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with the board's statutory authority and the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and makes technical changes. 9080 emergency is being amended to remove language relating to the Kentucky Teacher Internship Program and require that a candidate for the Option 6 alternative route to teacher certification have a recommendation from the employing school district prior to issuance of the professional certificate. 9100 emergency is being amended to revise the application requirements for issuance and renewal of a temporary Option 7 provisional certificate.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Cassie Trueblood, Education Professional Standards Board.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from members of the committee on this set of education regulations? Seeing none, please call the next regulation.
Department of Veterans Affairs, 17 KAR 4030.
17 KR 4030 amends Veterans Honor Guard burial provisions to clarify eligibility for the Burial Honor Guard program and increase the maximum amount of stipend provided to the Military Burial Honor Guard detail for providing military honors. The staff suggested amendment establishes a new section to contain requirements that were previously included in a definition, makes a correction in the incorporated material consistent with the administrative regulation, and makes minor technical amendments to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Al Duncan, Division Director, State Veteran Cemeteries.
Juan Renaud, Deputy Commissioner, Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you so much. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment?
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Any questions on this set of regulations dealing with the Department of Veterans Affairs? Seeing none, thank you so much. I got a little bit of housekeeping. I got a bit ahead of myself with the first regulation. We will circle back to that. Education Labor Cabinet. There were some staff amendments. Do we have a motion for approval of the staff amendments? We have a motion and a second on the staff amendments pertaining to all the regulations proposed by the Education Professional Standards Board. Without objection, is so ordered. Now that that's taken care of, up next, we have the State Board of Elections. If you would come forward.
State Board of Elections, 31 KAR 431, Emergency and Ordinary, 31 KAR 540, Emergency and Ordinary.
31 KR 4031 ENO, established pursuant to House Bill 564 from the 2022 regular session. The procedure and forms for the county clerk, county board of elections, and precinct election sheriff to report election and voting data after the election, and the secure online connection for the transmission of unofficial election results from county boards of election to the state board of election, following the tallying of votes and the procedures in which to use it. 31 KR 5040 ENO, establish procedures that shall be followed if a voter's eligibility is questioned, including the alternative ways to allow a voter to still cast a vote if the voter is unable to provide certain types of identification, forms that shall be completed in order to do so, and guidelines that county boards of elections shall follow if they choose to meet via video teleconference during voting days. The staff amendments for the ordinaries and emergencies for 31 KR 4031 and 5040 were approved by this subcommittee at the July 9th meeting that made changes to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. There are agency amendments for both 31 KR 4031 E and O that amends Section 3.2 to require totals for those candidates who have filed a declaration of intent with the Secretary of State to be a write-in candidate pursuant to KRS 117-2652, provided 5% or more of the votes cast in that candidate's election were for write-in candidates. There are no further amendments to 31 KR 5040 E and O.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Karen Sellers, Executive Director at the State Board of Elections.
Thank you so much. There are agency amendments. Are there any questions or discussion on the agency amendments? Seeing none, we have a motion on the agency amendment and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. I'm going to jump in just a second, but I believe my co-chair has a question or comment.
No, we just both of us want to echo our thanks for you and the Jefferson County Clerk's Office coming together. And I know I appreciate all that you go through on election night. And of course, there's a big one coming up. So I'll defer to my co-chair, but we do appreciate you and your efforts.
So no one has signed up to speak against. So I'm assuming everything was worked out with Jefferson County, being that they're not here.
Yes,
And then
sir.
after you comment there, I think Senator Yates has a comment or question.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for the time to meet with each of us individually and work with Jefferson County as well. And I think, like we discussed before, it's just that making sure that people have trust in our system and making sure that we really have the standard here in Kentucky, that we know that there's proper oversights and checks and quick information back to the people. And I just appreciate the work and the agreement that was able to be found. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the patience with the committee as we work through this process. And it was a good process. So,
There are times when this committee can be patient.
and most appreciated.
Any further questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Office of the Attorney General, 40 KAR 1010.
40 KR 10010 creates, pursuant to House Bill 302 from the 2023 regular session, the uniform procedure and timeline that the Department of Criminal Investigations with the Office of Attorney General shall follow when it conducts independent election inquiries, definitions, and outline data and forms that shall be requested to complete these inquiries. A staff amendment was approved by this subcommittee at the July 9th meeting that made changes to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. An agency amendment was approved by the subcommittee at the August 13th meeting that amended Section 412B and C for consistency with statutory law and amended Section 1412D to make a technical correction.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Amy Burke, Special Attorney with the Office of Attorney General.
If you can make sure that green light's on.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Ed Price. I'm the Division Director for the Public Corruption Unit with the Department of Criminal Investigations.
Thank you. There are no amendments, staff or otherwise. Are there any questions for the Attorney General's office on this set of regs? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Finance and Administration Cabinet, 200 KAR 521.
200 KR 5021 amends to comply with KRS Chapter 13A and Senate Bill 91 from the 2024 regular session, including to change the finance administration policies to raise the limit from $40,000 to $100,000 for what qualifies under small purchase authority for construction or other purchases by the Cabinet, institutions of higher education, and the legislative branch. Add additional limits for policy on expenditure levels and the number of quotes required for purchase amounts, and increase the expenditure band requiring one quote to $50,000 or less, and expenditures from $50,000 to $100,000 to have 3 quotes. Increase the threshold that requires bond issuance by vendors for performance and payment bonds for expenditures that are greater than $100,000 instead of $40,000 to be reported, and increase the threshold for expenditures from $250,000 to $500,000 for agencies to seek approval from the Cabinet prior to any force account projects that include capital construction projects, issuance or negotiation of revenue bonds, or any improvement or alteration to state property using material or labor provided by the agency. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A and updates a finance policy for clarity and to comply with Senate Bill 91.
Please state your name for the record. Make sure that green light's on there.
Yes. Patrick McGee, Office of General Counsel, Finance and Administration Cabinet.
Thank you so much. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Without objection, is so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regulations from the Finance and Administration Cabinet? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Pharmacy, 201 KAR 215 and 2470.
201 KR 2015 amends to change the time period continuing education hours are to be acquired to streamline a licensee's ability to track continuing education in line with requirements in other states, and update the web link for material incorporated by reference. 201 KR 2470 establishes what is considered a change of entity ownership requiring a new license or permit, the procedure for written notice to the board, and that a permit or license holder served a complaint or notice of hearing pending a disciplinary proceeding with the board may not change ownership until a final order of the board or upon agreement of all parties to the terms of a settlement. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, Eden Davis, General Counsel.
There is a staff amendment. Do I have a motion for approval of the staff amendment? A motion and second. Without objection, so ordered. Do we have any questions from members for the board? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Boxing and Wrestling Commission, 201 KAR 276, 2723, 2741, and 27106.
201 KR 27006 defines inspector authority to regulate unarmed combat sporting events, including the inspector duties of control of any show, and each contestant enforcement authority to investigate and issue violations and penalties, issuance of licenses, approval of bonds, and responsibility for hearings on questions, disputes, protests, complaints, or objections relating to the show. 201 KR 27023 establishes policies, procedures, and penalty guidelines associated with drug testing for participants, including to incorporate material by reference. 201 KR 27041 establishes standards governing conduct of licensed managers. 201 KR 106 establishes grounds for the Commission to issue penalties, types of penalties that may be assessed, and authority for inspectors to issue administrative violations, as well as a process for licensees to appeal violations issued by the Commission or its employees. The amended after comments versions for all of these regulations update statutory citations to comply with House Bill 366 that passed during the 2017 regular session, including to delete references to an outdated executive order. The staff amendments for all these regulations make changes to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. Additionally, the staff amendment for 201 KR 27023 amends Section 3 to delete alcohol.
Would you please identify your name for the record?
Matt Bird. Matt Bird, Executive Director, Kentucky Boxing and Wrestling Commission.
Thank you so much. And we do have a gentleman coming in on Zoom. If you can hear us, if you would state your name for the record. Can you hear us?
There is a halfway decent delay right now.
I'm told there's a delay. So we will wait. We are a patient committee, as was stated earlier. It's a very significant delay.
I'm Doug Harden. I'm having trouble hearing right now, but I'm the staff attorney for the commission, and thank you all for accommodating me today.
Doug, nod if you can hear me.
I'm typing to him.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. There are staff amendments. Do we have a motion for approval of the staff amendments? We have a motion. We have a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Anyone with questions for the commission? Senator Yates.
First of all, thank you for being here. Back when I was a kid, I started early on at the Boys Club and then in Derby City and gone through. And so I think it's so important for young people to have this. One of the other things is I think when they start competing, some of the testing policies, especially in adolescents and young adults, is so important too for that oversight. And so my only question that I saw that was removed from this as far as the anti-doping agency requirement is they removed alcohol from the testing. Can you tell me why that was done?
I cannot speak on why the World Anti-Doping Agency removed alcohol from their list, but from our standpoint, we still, that would be a safety issue with us if we did discover a contestant under the influence.
Okay, so my understanding is when the World Anti-Doping Agency is the floor, the ceiling, and we can always do above and beyond that within our agencies. Is that correct?
As far as my understanding is, yes.
Okay, I just saw that, and to me, I always thought that was because as long as it was in your system, and obviously having alcohol in your system and fighting is probably not a good combination. Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions from members of the committee on this topic? Did either of you gentlemen want to say anything in addition to? I know he's coming in from Zoom. Is it a special? Are you good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, 301 KAR 1410.
301 KR 1410 amends provisions to clarify the dates during which it is illegal to possess a gig, add a possession limit of 2 fish for sport fish taken by trot line, jug line, or set line, require sport fishing trot lines to be tagged at both ends with the angler's customer identification number, and prohibit hand grabbing on lakes less than 500 acres that are owned or managed by the department, except for Ballard, Peel, and Swan Lake Wildlife Management Area lakes in Ballard County.
If you would, please state your name for the record.
Stephen Fields, staff attorney.
Thank you so much. There are no amendments. Any questions from members? Would not be administrative regs without the Department of Fish and Wildlife here. Thank you, as always.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, I'm going to call an audible. I'm sorry to the Energy and Environment Cabinet. We're saving you for last. We're saving the best for last. We're going to keep trucking. We're going to go to the Transportation Cabinet. Motor Vehicle Tax.
601 AR 9220.
601 KR 9220 amends to comply with KRS Chapter 13A, allow a prospective customer to operate a vehicle with a properly issued dealer plate. Oh, I can't get my page. Without being accompanied by a licensed dealer, and delete language restricting the prospective customer to one demonstration trip. The staff suggests an amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A and amends Section 3 for consistency with KRS 186.070.1C3.
Would you state your name for the record?
Godwin Onodo, Division Director, Motor Vehicle Licensing.
John Johnson, Assistant
You
General
could
Counsel.
make sure that green light's on there, please, sir.
John Johnson, Assistant General Counsel, Transportation Cabinet.
There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion. We have a second. Without objection is so ordered. Any questions from members on motor vehicle tax? Seeing none, please call the next regulation.
Mr. Chairman, they also have a filed staff suggested substitute, which we've adopted.
Hold on. One moment. That's what we just did. We approved
Okay.
that.
Thank
Yes,
you.
that is approved, and that's part of this regulation now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please call the next regulation.
Education and Labor Cabinet, Department of Education, 702 KAR 320, 704 KAR 313, 704 KAR 130.
702 KR 320 amends provisions for finance officer certification to include that a finance officer applicant with at least 10 years work experience in local school district finance may meet the requirements of provisional certification in the absence of meeting the educational requirements. Require finance officers with provisional certification to become fully certified within 3 years instead of 5. Increase the continuing education a finance officer shall obtain each fiscal year from 12 to 18 hours, and revise material incorporated by reference to make changes related to finance officers. The staff's suggested amendment makes clarifying amendments and technical corrections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, and amends the titles of material incorporated by reference for consistency with the titles referenced in the administrative regulation. 704 KR 313 repeals academic standards containing general courses of study and academic content standards for use in schools, as the content standards are being incorporated in separate administrative regulations in 704 KR Chapter 8. 704 KR 8130 establishes the Kentucky Academic Standards for Visual and Performing Arts, which contain general courses of study and academic content standards of these arts for use in Kentucky schools.
You know the deal. If you would state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. Todd Allen, General Counsel for the State Board and Department of Education.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion. We have a second. Without objection, so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regulations from the Department of Education? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Energy and Environment Public Service Commission, 807 KAR 515, emergency.
807-5015, emergency only, amends requirements for utility pole attachments to expedite expansion of broadband by allowing attachers with multiple pending applications to prioritize an application, increasing from 1,000 to 3,000 the number of poles that may be requested through a single application, streamlining and clarifying invoice and payment processes, increasing from 60 to 90 days the time for an attacher to file an application exceeding 3,000 poles, establishing streamlined content requirements for special contracts for applications exceeding 3,000 poles, facilitating the complaint process for a special contract that cannot be negotiated within 15 days of the start of good faith efforts, and reducing from 180 to 60 days the window for a final order by the Commission. The amended after comments version revises timelines to indicate which timeline goes with which application, revises and corrects deadlines, and clarifies provisions for determining if a special contract is required for multiple orders for attachments. The proposed agency amendment amends Section 3.8 to correct transposed deadlines and amends Sections 3 and 4 to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Jeb Penny, Executive Advisor.
Thank you so much. There is an agency amendment. Are there any questions or discussion on the agency amendment? Seeing none, there is a motion for approval of the agency amendment. Is there a second? We have a second. Without objection, so ordered. I've got a quick question, and then we'll open it up to members. Refresh my memory. Did this come about through statute that we passed a year or so ago, or is this kind of on your own in response to what's going on the ground?
The original regulation in 2021 was a result of a House bill.
There you go. Okay.
The Commission had been working on this, and the amendments are a result of Senate Joint Resolution 175, which directed the Commission to make emergency amendments within 60 days of the effective date of the resolution.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was my only question. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Department for Public Health, 902 KAR 430.
902 KR 4030 amends to add to the list of screen conditions, increase the fee for hospitals submitting a newborn screening test to the state laboratory to $200, and establishes a fee of $50 for midwives to submit newborn screening tests to the state laboratory. The staff suggested amendment amends sections 5 and 13 for clarity.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Julie Brooks, Regulations Coordinator, Department for Public Health.
Thank you so much. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion. We have a second. Without objections, so ordered. Thank you so much. Any questions from members? Seeing none. I'm sorry. Representative Frazier Gordon.
I just have a comment. As an audiologist, I just want to thank you for adding profile. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, please call the next regulation.
Staying with CHFS, this is the Department for Community-Based Services, 922 KAR 1350, Emergency.
This regulation is being amended to establish separate standards for non-familial foster or adoptive parent applicants and relative or fictive kin foster or adoptive parent applicants, and remove child-specific language.
If you would, please state your name for the record.
I'm Kelly Root. I'm an Assistant Director in the Division of Protection and Permanency.
Rachel Ratliff, Regulation Coordinator for the Department for Community-Based Services.
Thank you so much. There are no agency amendments or staff amendments. Are there any questions from members on this regulation from the Department for Community-Based Services? Seeing none, thank you so much. Have a nice day. That would have been the end of today's agenda, but we will now circle back to the Energy Cabinet. If they want to step forward, Energy and Environment Cabinet, 401 KR 050.
401 50038 amends fee provisions for air emission permits to remove the exemption for actual emissions if those emissions are greater than 4,000 tons for a single pollutant, and exempt an emission source from invoicing under certain conditions. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Thank you for your patience. We held you up, but as you can see, there wasn't much on the agenda for today. If you would, please state your name for the record.
Chairman West, Co-Chairman Lewis, members of the committee. My name's Tony Hatton. I'm the Commissioner of the Department for Environmental Protection, and sitting to my left is Michael Kennedy. He's the Director of the Kentucky Division for Air Quality.
Thank you so much. The reason we put you off is today's your lucky day. Your regulation was the one that was somewhat controversial today. So
I understand, yes, sir.
So we actually have to talk about it a little bit. I think what's being passed out is a briefing you guys have provided to members of the committee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I've received this already and reviewed it. A number of other people have received it and reviewed it already. So this is not the first time most of us are looking at it, okay? this is a very important regulation change. And before we go any further, why don't you just, if you could, go into some pretty good detail on where we were.
Yes.
And what the regulation is doing, the proposal, what it would do.
I'd be glad to do that, Mr. Chairman. So this regulation 50038 is the emissions fee regulation in the Division for Air Quality set of regulations that was promulgated originally in 1993. So the Clean Air Act, the Federal Clean Air Act, which is under EPA authority, requires for permits to be issued for certain types of emissions, depending on what the contaminant might be and how much, might depend on whether or not it's a federal type of permit or state level type of permit. Kentucky is a Clean Air Act authorized state. In other words, if a facility in Kentucky gets a federally authorized permit, they're getting it issued by the State Division for Air Quality. And generally speaking, regulators say this all the time, especially state level regulators. I think they say it because it's generally true. It's almost always going to be better to deal with a state level permitting program than a federal level permitting program. We're closer to the issues. We know the issues our citizens have, our industries have, and so we're in a better position to issue permits and to issue them timely. In our air quality program, there are a host of different types of facilities that have air emissions, from electrical generating stations to chemical plants, industrial manufacturing facilities, distilleries, which is something that we're all really interested in, and maybe one of the issues that we're talking about here today as we try to work together. Metal fabricators, paint shops, those kind of things. So there's a lot of different types of facilities that are subject to the federal and sometimes state air quality regulations. The regulation that we are proposing to amend here, 50038, that is the way in which the state air quality program is funded. We get very little federal money to operate our state permitting program, and we use very little to no general fund money, so it's primarily restricted fund money. And historically, those restricted funds have come through a per ton emission fee that is charged to folks who have emissions. There's a lot of different ways you could do this, none of which are always going to be particularly welcomed by everybody. That's one of the unfortunate things. It's a difficult issue. Some states have permit fees and emission fees. Some states have just permit fees. And in Kentucky, we have simply emissions fees. There was a time a while back that we tried to modernize, or not modernize, but change the regulation a little bit because our per ton emission fee in Kentucky is high. Right now, under the current regulation, it's $142 per ton. So in the background of that, we've had conversations, particularly with some of our friends in the distillery business, who raised the question about the fairness of paying emissions fees for fire pump engines that are only there for the specific purpose of pumping water should a fire occur, which is understandable. They're required by their insurance companies, I think they can speak on it better than I can, to have those types of protections in place, and it's certainly understandable. So the question arose, is it a right or just thing to charge emissions fees for a fire pump engine that they're required to have, not as part of their operations, but in case they have a fire? And so we've had many conversations over the last year and a half. I think we made some progress. Maybe it's arguable that the agency didn't go as far as maybe some people thought it should in this draft regulation. But so having had those conversations and understanding the legitimacy of that question that was raised, we sought to do two things in this regulation that you have before you that we've amended as an agency. There's language in the regulation that would exclude fire pump engines from being subject to air emissions fees. And where that might be particularly important is, let's say you have an operation where you may have storage at different locations around the mothership, so to speak, but they may be geographically separated. And at those locations, the only thing they might have that might be subject to the emission fees would be a fire pump engine. So one of the things that we've done in this regulation is to make a way for those fire pump engines to be excluded so that there aren't any emissions fees paid on those fire pump engines. So what that will do is companies or industries that have previously been paying an emissions fee for fire pump engines. They will no longer be required to do that with the regulation as amended. Secondly, we sought to decrease the overall per ton air emission fee. As I said, right now, it's sitting at about $142 and change per ton. And that sometimes fluctuates depending on how many new sources we have, how many sources may drop off. It's an annual thing. And so the way we have to fund the program is this is what our program is going to cost. Nothing more, nothing less. This is what it costs us to implement our air quality program, which is very important for lots of reasons. And so what does the per ton emission fee need to be based on our proposed amount of emissions we're going to have to be able to meet that cost need? So every year we have to recalculate that. While we were in the middle of this conversation and internally trying to decide what was the best way to go, because we did receive some comments and concerns that we thought we needed to address, we also felt as though it might be appropriate to seek to lower our per ton emission fee. And so the way in which we did that is we removed that 4,000 ton cap. That 4,000 ton cap is not a requirement by EPA. You can or cannot, as you choose to implement the 4,000 ton cap, which we have historically implemented. As of last year, that 4,000 ton cap, I think it included about 30,000 tons of emissions that would not be paid a fee because they were emissions over 4,000 tons total across all the regulated entities that we have. By removing the 4,000 ton cap, there's a positive and perhaps maybe seen as a negative. And what that means is those entities that emit more than 4,000 tons, although they will be paying a lower per ton fee just like everyone else, they will be paying that fee on more tons emitted on all the tons they emit. And so as a result of that, you're going to see increases primarily in the electrical generating sector. I think LG&E total at Gent about 782,000. While some of their other facilities actually drop, I don't know if it's a wash or not, but 3 of their other generating units actually will reduce because of the reduction in dollars per ton. I think Big Rivers, about $73,000 increase. TVA is the big one. It's north of $1 million increase because they have a significant amount of emissions. One of the things that does result from that, though, is as that emission fee goes down, those who don't emit more than 4,000 tons, their actual annual emission fees are going to go down to the tune of, we think, about probably 708 facilities. So in a nutshell, that's what we sought to accomplish with this regulation was, 1, to address the concerns about fire pump engines, and 2, to seek to lower our per ton emission fee, and that was the way in which we proceeded. And I can certainly, Chairman West, if that's the detail you were looking for, or if you have some more questions, whatever you need, sir, we'll be glad to try to answer.
No, that's very good detail. Would your counterpart like to chime in at all? I see you. Okay. I saw you nodding. I didn't know if that was that you wanted to say something or not, but that's fine. I'm just gonna, before we go any further, I'm gonna now open it up for questions from members on this set of regs. I've got several questions, but Senator Yates, if you want to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate all the back and forth questions and answers over the past few days. This one, I got a lot of calls and information because of the concern, mostly because of the possibility, and based on your testimony today, some parts of Louisville Gas and Electric, which affects part of my area, and then how that would be passed on to the PSC Commission, to the ratepayers. Right. We're trying to figure out what that number is, and it looks like there's some places that would go down slightly, but some back up, and I was trying to do my best playing with numbers and making phone calls and trying to get that information. And my fear is, and I understand this is something that we're required to do, and we have to balance the budget to make sure we pay for it. What I want to make sure is I'm not balancing that budget based on my ratepayers who are already in a really tough spot. Right. And I know that's something you care about very much as well, and something we've had those conversations. And so I wanted to voice that, and that was my continued concern. And I know I was probably extremely annoying on this particular issue, but that is why.
Well, Senator Yates, I'd be glad to give you some more detailed information, particularly on LG&E right now, if you'd like it.
Yes, please.
Okay, so it looks like Brown Station 2022 versus 2023 will have a reduction from 140,000 to 114,000. This is just projected in 2023. Gent's the facility where the increase will be. It was 1.2 million in 2022, and it's projected to be 2 million in 2023 if this amended reg goes into effect. Trimble, 2022 was about 844,000, projected in 2023, 687,000. And what may be of particular interest to you, Senator Yates, is Cane Run and Mill Creek. We do not assess, the Division for Air Quality does not assess
Louisville
fees to Cane Run and Mill Creek. Those are controlled by the Louisville Air Pollution Control District.
They're already paying an additional fee. That's right. And one of my concerns, and I know that obviously in Carroll that that's one of my, they're concerned because they don't want to pass that right to their individuals, and then some of the business community as well. Just trying to figure out how we're going to balance that. And just to me, obviously I care and I fight so much for my district, but I also believe that I have a voice for Kentucky, and a lot of people saw me stomp up and down when we talk about cleaning some of the coal mines that I felt that were already shut because I was so worried about the increased cost on gas and electric for the people. That's my same concern.
Well, one of the challenges is anytime that you seek to drop the fee, that means somebody either is going to pay more to pay the bill, or you're going to have to go grab people who have never had to pay it before. That's when you start getting into the really difficult scenario of addressing small businesses who heretofore, whether right or wrong, have not had to pay the fee. So it's a balancing act for sure. I understand your concerns.
Sure. And the major, and if I may, Mr. Chair, the majors, the small business and me being, it's one thing that I do. I have a law practice, but also in real estate, investment, commercial properties. And I've watched more and more people pull out of that because of the utility costs continuing to increase, and we need to make sure that we're providing that. In fact, of so many, that is a major concern for so many of my small businesses. So when we look to balance it, I always worry about, are we balancing it on the back of ratepayers? And that's my concern.
I understand.
Any other questions from members at this time? I'm going to get in. I'll just warn you, I'm going to have about 5 questions here.
Yes, sir.
So bear with me here. This is a very important topic, really. I'm going to eventually get to some of Senator Yates' stuff on particulars on rates, electric rates, but I'm going to start from a different spot. And this, I'm taking language straight out of your briefing document here. The emission fee is calculated by taking the division's budgeted amount and dividing by the total tons of subject emissions. Who determines what that budget is?
The budget is based on our actual costs through the budgeting process. We propose what it's going to cost to operate our program based on the number of people that we have in seats and the operating cost of our program. So that's the number that we look at. And then every year, early in the year, we'll send out a survey to emitters to try to get a better idea of what they're doing and how much they're going to be emitting so that we can project what the per ton fee will be for that next year.
So specifically the program, you're budgeting based on the program. Let's be very specific. What is the program? Are we talking about energy environment cabinet, or we're just talking air quality?
We're talking specifically about the Kentucky Division for Air Quality, Mr.
Gotcha,
Chairman.
just that program. And
Yes.
so before we get into this proposed regulatory change, what was your proposed budget? What was your budget before, and what is the current proposed budget that these numbers will be based on?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I think our budget's in the neighborhood of $18.7 million to operate the program.
Is the current
right? And
proposal.
any changes in that will be based entirely on costs that we accrue beyond our own ability to affect that.
In our I'm sorry, I don't know this. I should know it. I was on the budget committee. Is this a line item in our state budget for air quality?
Well, it's a restricted fund, so I don't know if it's.
Don't know if it shows up on the sheet or not.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
yes,
gotcha.
it is a restricted fund.
So my main question is the current budget is 18.7. Is that a significant increase from where it had been?
No.
Okay.
Now, a few years ago, there were maybe some larger jumps from one year to the next, but it's leveled out a little bit because of the arc.
In other words, you're not going from from $17 million budget to an $18.7 million budget.
There's no change with this amendment. There's no change in our budget? Yeah. I think the question he's asking is, did our budget last year increase this year? Did we see a major increase in our costs that
Right.
perhaps the question he's asking is, did this drive us to do this?
Correct,
regularly?
exactly. Thank you.
No. And I can't give you those exact answers, but I know that's not the motivating factor for this.
Yeah, you hit the
For
nail
this
on the head.
regular.
That's where I was getting
Yeah.
at is are we trying to go from a $15 million budget to an $18 million budget and make it work with this proposal? Okay. I'll switch gears on you to the energy question. LGE, TVA, those type of people.
Right.
How the only way they're going to pay for this is through the consumer, right? They're allowed to build this into a rate case. Is that correct?
I'm not an expert on the PSC issues, but I do know that in general, environmental requirements are applicable to rate cases at PSC, but
so that they could, if they get this, they could just pass it along to.
Well, I don't know that for sure. That's my understanding is in general, they can pass this cost along to the ratepayers. I don't know about this specifically.
Gotcha. So we have we'll call them the big boys for lack of a better term, but we have the large scale utility people, LG&E, TVA, AEP, others, Kentucky Power. How many utilities do you think there are that are viable utilities out there that are under the $4,000
The 4,000
ton cap?
I think that anybody other than TVA, Big Rivers, and certain LG&E facilities, in particular Gent. As I've said, other electrical utilities that are viable that are less than 4,000 tons, they're going to be paying less because their per ton fee goes down.
Yep. So it goes without saying in your briefing document you say 4 people. So 4 of those people, of the 4, those are LG&E, TVA, and Big Rivers.
And Jim Beam was listed because at one of Jim Beam's locations, their costs will go up. At 3 other ones, it will be decreased. And so money-wise, it's basically a wash.
Gotcha.
They may not see it that way, but that's the way the math works out.
Okay. This will be my final question, then we'll
Yes, sir.
move along. So this exemption of emergency engines, is that new? Is that a new
Perhaps
exemption?
There's fire engine, there's fire protection motors, and then there's emergency generators. One of the questions that's been asked, maybe where the agency should have taken another step, would have been to exclude emergency generators. As we sit here right now, we see that as being a problem. I mean, you can argue that from a regulatory standpoint, and I think there's actually a petition at the Office of Administrative Hearings right now addressing that issue. Emergency generators are used for things other than just fire suppression. Matter of fact, that may not be their initial and primary purpose. There are lots of facilities that may have emergency generators. If we exclude emergency generators, then we're going to create a hole that we're going to have to fill some other way. That's just what it works out to be.
So explain, let's stop there for just a second, because that's a very important part of this whole conversation is the emergency generators.
Right.
How is that tonnage calculated let's say I have a body shop,
right,
and I've got an emergency generator outside, Generac. Like how is that calculated as far as from a tonnage standpoint?
Well, an emergency generator or some other feature, which is what requires you to have an air quality permit. What you pay the fee on is actually how much do you emit from that operation. And make sure I'm answering this correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So the emergency generator may not be being used all the time.
So that's my main question.
Right.
So it's the actual emissions, theoretically.
Emissions. Yes.
So if I never turn it on, I should be charged 0 on that.
If you don't have any other emissions from that facility. But as a standard rule, if you have the need to have an air quality permit, the fact that you have an emergency generator is just a unit that has to be on your permit, and you have certain limits from it. It has to be added into what your total emissions might be, but you may be paying for emissions that aren't even directly associated.
I guess that's my question
Yeah,
is
and it's confusing,
If
I
I've
admit.
got an air quality permit and I have an emergency generator on it,
Right.
and does that cost me anything extra if I don't turn it on?
Michael, can you?
And I'll try my best to answer your question, Chairman West. So, when we look at a fire pump engine, we don't look at it just by itself. We look at our regulations for permitting. We look at both what's your potential to emit in tons per year. So if you have over 25 tons per year and you're subject to a NSP or NESHAP, which is a federal regulation, then, okay, we say, all right, you need a state origin permit at least, maybe even Title V. But looking at the state origin permit, if you have that on your permit and you have other emissions that are, whatever your actual emissions are for that year, you're going to be charged on, even if, that, like you said, the fire pump engine didn't operate, because we did issue a permit and then we look at actual emissions.
I think you hit on the key words there, potential to emit.
Yeah.
And I understand that this is not Division of Air Quality language. This is CFR, probably language, mandated CFR language. So in reality, some of our businesses in the state they would be charged a tonnage rate simply because of the potential. In case the emergency generator was turned on, it might emit XYZ. So that was my question there. That's all the questions I have right now. I think Senator Yates has another question.
Just my experience and other hat, back to the trial lawyer hat, I know that the requirement too, when you have the emergency generators in there and the pumps and stuff, they are required to be turned on so often to be run and checked. So there's never the situation where they're never turned on or run.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. I'm going to call an audible here. We do have several people signed up to speak against. I'll leave it up to the agency. Do you want us to proceed that route now, or do you have a request?
Well, I think the agency is in a position where we can agree to a 30-day deferral on this regulation package. We can agree to that.
Okay. Okay. So if we're going to do that and go down this route, we have procedure that we have to go by, right?
Yes.
So I'm not.
Did I get out of procedure? I apologize if I did.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I had to know which way you were going to go, though, first.
Yes.
So my proposal as chair is, if we're going to do this and head down this route, there's no need to hear right now anybody speak against it if we're going to do a deferral. So as the chairman, I would ask you right now, would you be willing to defer this regulation until next month?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the agency is willing to do that.
If that's in order, then I do need a motion for deferral of this regulation.
I'll make a motion for deferral of this legislation. Thank you.
Senator Yates has a motion for deferral. Is there a second? Representative Bridges has a second. Without objection, is so ordered. This regulation is deferred at this time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
We'll probably see you next month.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
That does conclude our agenda for today. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 8th at 1 p.m. That's the second Tuesday in October.
October 8th is the proposed date. If you have any questions or any problems with that, members, you need to see staff. Okay, Senator Yates has a conflict. He's telling us now with that date and time. Well, while we're here, let's go ahead and talk about that. Do we want to try to pick another backup date at this time? Let me look at my calendar. I guess that's important. I actually don't know what your over-under is today.
38.
It's 38. Where are we now?
54-38.
Done. It's October 8th. That works out perfectly for me. I was having a hard time doing the 8th anyway. What other dates are available? Okay, we need to have our meeting before the 15th. I know this is a stupid question. We can meet any day, correct? Any day of the week? Okay, all right. Yep. Okay, what about, how about the 9th? Trial that whole week. Okay. The week after that is committee week, so everybody's back in town for that. What about, I hate to do this because that means that actually works out. How about the 14th? That's a Monday. That's what? Columbus Day. Was that a state employee issue?
We can meet unless it's a state holiday.
That's my question. Is
So
that
it is not a state holiday.
it is not a state holiday? Okay. I'm good with the 14th. Good. All right.
Pending scheduling confirmation.
Pending scheduling and any other things the LRC might throw up at us. Okay. All right.
1 p.m. on the 14th.
1 p.m. on the 14th. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other business to come before this committee? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned.